In this video, we're going to have a look at how to use the quadratic formula. We've got two examples that we're going to work through. At National 5 level, you can be expected to solve some quadratics. For example, there might be a question that looks like this. 11x plus 30 equals 0, and the question might say solve. And if that were the case, well, we would factorise that into our two brackets, and then we would split those brackets and solve them. But sometimes there are expressions that are not easy to factorise. Sometimes there are expressions that cannot be factorised, but we still can solve them. And that's what the kind of focus of this video is going to be on, when we're going to be using the quadratic formula. We use the quadratic formula when we're asked to solve a quadratic equation and we're asked to round our answer. Hugely important. So if it says solve this equation to one decimal place, solve this equation to two significant figures, if it says solve the equation and it tells you to round your answer, you must use the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is given to you on your formula list. It looks like this here. Okay, so if we've got a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, that's important, it must be equal to 0. Then to find the roots, we apply this formula here, minus b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so we're going to work through two examples and see how this works. Solve this equation, giving your answer to two decimal places. So we've got a quadratic equation. It's a quadratic equation because the highest power is squared, and it tells us to round our answer. So because of that, we're going to use the quadratic formula. So it's minus b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and that is all over 2a. Okay, the full thing is over 2a. Okay, sometimes people just do the first term over 2a. So if we have a look at our equation, x squared plus 5x plus 3, we need to be able to extract the values of a, b and c. What is a, what is b, and what is c? Well, a is the number that multiplies the x squared, so technically there's a 1 there. B is the thing that multiplies the x, and c is the number at the end. If there were any negatives there, we would need to include our negatives. So we'll substitute these values in place of a, b and c. So we're going to have minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times 1 times 3. And that's all over 2 ones. Okay, that would usually be where you would get your first mark. So we're going to get minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 minus 12 over 2. And that's going to be minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. So obviously when we solve quadratic equations, we usually get two roots. So we get two values, two answers. So at this moment in time, we've got a plus and minus option. So we're now going to split into the separate branches. So we're going to have minus 5 minus root 13 over 2. And then we're going to have x equals minus 5 plus root 13 over 2. And then this is just a case of putting this into your calculator. So we've got minus 5 minus root 13 over 2. And that's minus 4.307. 3027, sorry. Minus 4.3027. And then we've got minus 5 plus root 13 over 2. Minus 5 plus root 13 over 2. And that's going to be minus 0.697 blah blah blah. So the question has asked us to round it to two decimal places, so we need to remember to do that. So we're going to be minus 4.30 to two decimal places. And over here, we're going to get, well, this 9 would go up to a 10, so it's going to be rounded up to 70 to two decimal places. Okay, so you extract your values of a, b and c, substitute into your equation. Once you get to this stage, you split into the two different branches. You know to use this because it asks you to solve an equation and it tells you to round your answer. Got one final one to look at. I'm just going to move this over a little bit. There we go. Solve 2x squared plus 5x equals 1, giving your answer to two significant figures. Okay, let's have a look here. See if we go back to our formula, do you notice that in order to use the quadratic equation, it must be equal to 0. Now if we have a look at our equation, it is not equal to 0. So we're going to need to make it equal to 0. So you don't want this 1 here, so I'm going to subtract it from both sides. So it's 2x squared plus 5x minus 1 equals 0. So we are asked to solve a quadratic equation and we want to round our answer. Therefore, because of those two pieces of information, we're going to use the quadratic formula. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what are the values of a, b and c? A is 2, b is 5, c is negative 1. So we're going to have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared subtract 4 times 2 times minus 1. And that's all over 2 2's. So we're going to have minus 5 plus or minus the square root of 25 subtract 4 times 2 is 8 times negative 1, so that's negative 8. So you need to watch out there when we're subtracting a negative. If ever you do this sort of question and you get a math error on your calculator, it's probably because you've not typed it in properly. You've maybe lost a negative. So you just got to be careful when you're resolving this. So we're subtracting a negative, that becomes addition. So we've got to our stage where we can start to split it. So that's going to be negative 5 subtract root 33 over 4. And x equals negative 5 plus root 33 over 4. At this stage here, we can fire this into our calculator. So it's negative 5, negative root 33 over 4. That's going to be negative 2.686. And then we'll do negative 5 plus root 33 over 4. And that is going to be 0.186. The question has asked us to round our problem to 2 significant figures. So if we're doing that here, so we go along to our second highest place value. This is the 6, so it's going to go up to a 7, so it's going to be minus 2.7 to 2 significant figures. And in this problem here, we go along to our second highest place value, where there's a value. So that's this 8, so that's going to get rounded up to a 9, so it's 0.19 to 2 significant figures. Okay, so there's just 2 examples of how to work through the quadratic formula. Comes up very often in National 5. Some easy marks here. Okay, so make sure you're confident with this and know how to use it. Thanks very much.